Strawberry. Oh. The fruit or the donut? Oh, man. He was in there deciding which way to sin because Linda brought a bunch of donuts. But Linda, it isn't like choosing to sin or not sin. It's choosing which type of sin to sin when she brings food. Huh? Right. Well, before you open your Bibles, I'm not saying don't open your Bibles, because I would never say that. But before you do, we're going through a lot at the church. God's doing some awesome things, and every time God does awesome things, there's crazy things going on at the same time. And I found out for the whole month of March, there was a big group of people that were praying specifically for me on a daily basis, and I'm like, wow. And I'm sitting there going, oh, Lord, let it be for good things, Hey, but if you would, please just break off. If you're new here, that's fine. Just get in a group. You don't have to pray out loud, or you may want to. But we just want to pray for our body, our fellowship, what God's doing here, and that God may just bless Calvary Chapel, the Coastlands, that we may bless him back. Not that we may just feast on the blessings and be selfish with them, but we want to hand them all back, and that's always been our prayer. So why don't you guys get into groups of 3 or 4, and if you're gutsy, you can find people you don't know and just spend a little bit of time in prayer. And it's a good way to get to know each other. So just break up into groups, and we'll have it for about 5 minutes or so. You wouldn't believe what those crazy people made me do at church. We prayed. I remember, the church I came from is it's a very large church, and my pastor, for a while, just started having people on Sunday mornings get together and pray, and literally hundreds and hundreds of people left the church. Yeah, crazy, right? Yeah, Southern California, just kidding. Crazy people. Anyways, we do have a busy weekend. The Young Men's Retreat is this weekend, right? Right, so that's happening. Also, my daughter is driving down, if you're not going to the Young Men's Retreat, which means men are going to be going that Saturday night, but if you're back here and not going or unable to go to that and support the young men, it is at 6 o'clock. My daughter and a friend of hers are going to be speaking at, what's happening here? Sorry. I didn't think I would be here all day, so my shirt's dirty and I'm all gross. I thought I was going to be able to go home and take a shower, but didn't happen. Anyways, my daughter will be speaking about the Syrian refugee crisis at Corpus Christi Christian Fellowship at 6 p.m. So that's on Staples Avenue, just south of Saratoga. And they're really a ministry partner with us. We love those guys. And so they opened up their facility for my daughter. So anyways, but they're involved in the Syrian refugee crisis. And really what's going on there, instead of just moving a bunch of Muslims from one place to another, they just remain Muslims. They remain in the dark and captured by the enemy. So what they're doing is they're strategically placing themselves where the Muslims are traveling through, and they're meeting them with grace and love. See, they're running. These are upper class and middle class Syrians, because the other ones don't have enough money to run. So they're leaving their homes, they're leaving their jobs, they're leaving their careers, everything behind. And what they're doing is they're running from radical Islam. And so what my daughter is involved in is just placing Christians all along that route as they try to get into Western Europe. And so they're running into Christians who are loving on them, and they don't find love within Islam. And so think about it. You want to re-Christianize Europe? Make all the Muslims Christians and let them still have 12 kids. Right? I mean, you're going to re-Christianize it. And really the response is incredible, and there's a pouring out of the Holy Spirit on the people that are running. And it's very common that they have a dream of a man in white. And that's not rare. It happens all the time. And they're able to say, well, Jesus is appearing to them in their dreams. And they're saying, who's this man in white? And white universally represents purity. The man of purity is able to take away your sins. Because you can take his purity and he'll take your sins. And that's what they're able to offer. And so McKenna's going to be probably going out for 9 or 10 months next year into Europe. And her job is going to be training people to minister to the Syrian refugees, and then also probably ministering to them as well. But pray for Dad, because Dad's like, oh, you just took a year off, you're going to take another year off of school. That's hard. I love school. But I'm like, darn it, you're going on the mission field. What kind of daughter are you? Pastor Dad, right? Anyways, but we love her. We'll miss her too. So that'll be Saturday evening at 6 o'clock. What else is coming? We just got a gang of good stuff coming up. And I guess the response, if you guys were here on Sunday, Grant came up in his short shorts and his athletic socks. Oh, I was watching that online. I was dying. That was so classic. Oh my gosh, so funny. But hey, there's a bunch of people signed up, so that's good. VBS is my favorite thing to be involved in. I think if it would pay the bills, I think I'd be a children's worship leader, right? Because the worship is just so pure and fun, Anyways, all right, enough of that. Joshua chapter 11. Let's go ahead and read verses 1 and 2. Joshua chapter 11. It says, "And it came to pass when Jabin, king of Hazor, heard these things, that he sent Jobab, king of Madon, to the king of Shimron, to the king of Ashvath, and to the kings who were there from the north in the mountains in the plain of Cheroth in the lowland, and in the heights of Dor on the west. Now, last time they beat these other kings that we were together, they wiped out these other kings as they're opening up the land to take possession for the Lord, and that was in the south. Now, this Cheroth, like, is actually what they used to call the Sea of Galilee. Like, Gennesaret is what they call it today. Like, when we say, where's the Sea of Galilee? They're like, what? But it's actually the Sea of Gennesaret today. And so it's more related to the ancient word that they used to use. But so now they're moving further up north, and there's a campaign that's going to take place as they continue to conquer the land, the promised land that the Lord had given to them. Verse 3, to the Canaanites in the east and in the west, the Amorite, the Hittite, to the Perizzite, the Jebusite in the mountains, and the Hivite below, and Hermon in the land of Mizpah. And so we have 6 major nationalities that inhabited the promised land. Now we know it's very small. It's like the size of New Jersey. And so as you look at the land of Israel, it's a small area. But remember, back then it wasn't like they had the ability to control a large area. They didn't have cars, they didn't have planes, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have these types of things. And so really you'd have these city-states, and then the city-states would gather together, and if like 4 or 5 of them gathered together, they kind of considered themselves a nation. And so that's where these people groups are mentioned. The people as a whole, for our intents and purposes, are called the Canaanites. Okay, and they still call them that, but they break them down specifically. But these people are living in that day, and so they're going into another valley, so they'll go 5 miles from one kingdom to another kingdom. Okay, these ancient kingdoms. And so they're listed. But God had promised 40 plus years prior that he would give these specific people into the land. Or these specific people groups. Now what's happening is these people groups are gathering together against them, so they're going to be able to get most of it in one fell swoop. Like God is saying, I'm going to take care of it. And so often we see God's promises is far off. But understand, when they come to be, man, they are real and they are powerful. So often we doubt it. I always tell people, when you fail in Bible prophecy is when you don't take it seriously enough, when you don't take it exact enough. And so we see these groups of people that were promised years and decades before are now gathering together against them from the north. It says in verse 4, so they went out and all their armies with them, as many people as the sand that is on the seashore in multitude, with very many horses and chariots. Now, obviously, the armies were limited. They weren't an unlimited amount, but as Joshua writes this, it's like, oh my gosh, these armies were huge. Now, there was a historian named Josephus. You guys have probably heard that name tossed around. Understand that Josephus was a Jew, but he was a Roman slave. Remember, Jerusalem was overthrown in AD 70. And so he was a slave of the Roman Empire, which was now ruling over the land. Okay? But he was also a historian, and he lived around the year 100. So that gives you some context. But he was a historian, so he's taken all the stories, all the history, and he put them in a book. And that's how we know a lot of the setting and what was happening in those days. Plus, as a very accurate historian, 2,000 years closer than we were to them, he's giving us more accurate pictures of exactly what was going on. And in his account, he wrote that there was 300,000 foot soldiers in this army, 10,000 cavalry, which means 10,000 men on horseback, and 21,000 chariots. So that's a lot, right? Okay. In comparison, Israel had about 600 troops total. And remember, Israel was full of mountain fighters. They didn't fight with big old long swords. Why? You swing back a big sword and you're in the bushes, what happens? You can't swing back, right? You get stuck. And so they're shorter swords, they're lighter swords, they're running around, they're ambushers and all that. Now they're coming against the tanks. It's like, oh, great, and here comes these horses and these guys able to carry heavy artillery. And so they must have felt like, man, we're ants before these people, right? You ever feel like that? Oh no, what am I going to do? So yet they have many things against them. Verse 5, when all these kings had met together, they came and they camped together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. But the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid because of them, for tomorrow about this time I will deliver all of them slain before Israel. You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire. And so he tells them, this is what you're going to do, and I'm going to deliver them to you. So he's told to hamstring the horses, which means you cut some tendons in the horses in their back legs so they can't even get up. Okay? Now you would think, why wouldn't they just go steal the horses? Remember, they're ambushers. So the night before the battle, they're going in and they're hamstringing, right? Why didn't they just steal the horses? Well, there's two reasons. Number one, they didn't know how to ride horses. They weren't good on horses, right? It would be like dirt, dirt, you know. Remember when David tried to put on Saul's armor to go fight Goliath? He was a young man, right? And we know something about Saul. He was like 6'4". In those days when the average Israelite, they guess, was about 5'4". He was a full head and shoulder above everybody. And so he put on someone else's armor, and that wasn't going to work. You ever try to give someone else's speech? It doesn't work. You know, some men have had to do funerals in our church. I go, I'll give you some notes, but you got to go through the notes and make them yours. You got to read through them. You got to understand. And if it doesn't work, you change them around so it fits the way you speak. But when people do that, oh, man, it is uncomfortable because it's someone else's tools. And, you know, if you were asked to read my notes, you'd be going, what? You know, what are you doing? Okay? And so, one, they have a way of warfare, but it was for them to all of a sudden adopt some new way, it wasn't good. But the second reason, if they kept them, the enemies would probably, or if they could, they probably could just recapture them and then have the greater advantage once again. Okay? Also, the Lord wanted them to be just hand-to-hand combat people. And this is very common throughout the scriptures because the Lord wants the victory. Remember, he throughout the scriptures, he tells us, do not trust in the power of man, trust in the power of God. Do not trust in horses, do not trust in chariots. Do not trust in those, in your enemy's weapons. You know, when the Bible says, you're not supposed to return evil for evil, are you? What's your weapon? Your weapon's good. Oh, man. Why couldn't we have an angry God? You know? Well, the thing is, vengeance is his. He's going to judge perfectly. But the reason we don't is because we wouldn't live through his anger. I'm so glad that he's a merciful, just God. And he wants us to reply in like manner. You know, I often think of Paul and his conversion. When Paul was killing Stephen, what if Stephen had just turned around and cussed them out and flew them the bird? Think Paul would have been impressed with that and gotten saved later? What did he do? He forgives them for killing him, and he looks up into heaven and he sees the Lord descending to take him home. Paul, I think, was absolutely bugged by that, so much so that he tried to push the Lord further away until God finally appeared to him. So his witness was incredible. Even though he died, his witness was incredible. There's a new movie coming out about Columbine. One of the most famous stories about the Columbine disaster, where these two young men, very disturbed young men, went in and started shooting people. And they let you live if you renounced Christ, but if you claimed Christ, they would kill you. And so there's a movie coming out about the girl that was shot because she claimed Christ, and she died. You know, but think about it, we wouldn't be talking about her today if she hadn't renounced. Now, how many people are going to be in heaven? Now, she would still be living today, so right now it hurts. But in 100 years, if the Lord tarries, her story will still be told. And you know what? There's going to be people entering into heaven now for a few decades, right? That was quite a long time ago. But decades. So let's just say she lived to be 80 years old. She would have more than 60 years of converts during what would be her lifetime. And so she gave up 60-some years. But how many people came to know Christ through that giving up of those years? And how many years does she have ahead of her to enjoy the reward in heaven for that sacrifice? Oh, so often we get the wrong perspective, don't we? So often we're looking at the here and now, and we're whining and complaining and ruining our witness. And God calls us to be different. And so they're not supposed to do things the Lord's way. You know, sometimes we see people being financially successful, and perhaps you're in business and you know they're cheating. Maybe you should do the same thing. You know, it's amazing to me to see what churches are willing to stoop to in order to get people to show up at their church and give. It's like crazy. Should I try that? Should I act like the world in order to get people to come to the church? You know, and so things like that I don't want to do. But when they start marketing God, it's weird. It's really weird to me. You know what? My undergraduate degree was in marketing. And I don't market God. In fact, I'm afraid to put a commercial on our own radio station. That's why we have those short shelters. Those are our commercials. Because those are short Word of God, you know, 3-minute little segments of the Word of God. Because I'm not going to go in there, hey, we got the best this, that, and the other, you know, and do a song and dance. And so we accept the things of the world. You know, we do things this way. We put schemes in the church to draw people. We lie, we deceive. We bait and switch. Like we're a car dealer or something. Any car dealers in here? Oh, you work for one, Chris. But it's easy to do that, isn't it? That's successful. Let's do it. But what you always got to ask is, what is successful in God's eyes? You know, when I wasn't here on Sunday, but I did watch you, Hannah. But when I wasn't here on Sunday, I got to sit in a church of about 70 people. And I tell you what, that teaching was one of the best teachings I've heard in a long time. And that man is a faithful man. And he's been doing it for a few decades, just teaching people God's word. I'm like going, man, this guy's powerful. I never heard that out of Joel Osteen, what I heard out of that man. And you know what? He's just going to faithfully do whatever God calls him to do, and he's not out there whining and complaining, how come I don't have more? You know? He's just doing, and you know what? His rewards are huge in heaven. And I was just so blessed and just reminded, whack, whack, what God's view of success really is. So watch out for using methods of the world to be successful. 2 Corinthians 10, 3-5, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. We use God's weapons of warfare. Some trust in chariots, some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God. Psalm 20, verse 7. We're going to trust in God's things. You guys need to know this, and we've done this in the past, and we're going to do it again. When things start happening, we are going to break down and pray. We are going to call church-wide fasts. And we've done it in the past, and we're going to do it again. You know, it's just an important thing, because this is where we battle for souls. This is where we battle. This is where things come together. So Joshua and all the people of war with him, they came to the waters, this camp where they were, and they attacked the people. And they had marched all night, and they had hamstrung the horses. Verse 8, and it says, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Israel, who defeated them and chased them to greater Sidon, to the brook of Mesrephoth, and to the valley of Mizpah eastward. They attacked them until they left none of them remaining. So Joshua did to them as the Lord had told him. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots with fire. Now, there was a king quite a few years later named King Saul. And a king in that day would lead people into war, into battle. King Saul was told to go into battle, and he didn't do what the Lord called him to do. He was called to defeat the Amalekites, and he didn't do what the Lord had called him to do, and he blamed it on the people. So he had victory, and God gave him victory, but he was disobedient in victory. Now Joshua was obedient in victory. Listen, when the Lord calls you into something, he calls you to be obedient and faithful to his call. And sometimes we think, oh, well, this is happening, and now we're going to change everything up and go against what the Lord has for us. Don't do that. Just be obedient to God's call. Verse 10, Joshua turned back at the time and took Hazor and struck its king with the sword. For Hazor was formerly the head of all those kingdoms. And they struck all the people who were in it with the edge of the sword, and utterly destroying them. There was none left breathing. Then they burned Hazor with fire. Many are thinking, oh man, they're just wiping everybody out. Again, if you haven't been here with us in Joshua, you need to understand God had dealt with his people and tried to draw this people to himself for over 400 years. 430 years. These were the people that were involved in radical bestiality and all kinds of perversion, and they were actually taking babies that were born out of these perversions, and they were burning them as a sacrifice to their god. One of the names is Molech. That's the most common name that you'll hear. They heat a statue up to be red hot, and they just place these infant babies in the hands of this god just to commit to the god of pleasure. And that's where they had gotten all types of venereal disease. These people would integrate with any people that would show up. And so God had protected the nation of Israel that was chosen to bring forth a Messiah. That's why he chose them. He needed to bring forth a Messiah from a people group. And he chose this people, raised them up through Abraham. And he took them as a group of 70, put them in a place that was very segregated, Egypt. And he allowed them to grow to be over 2 million people so that they would go back into the land that God had promised, and they would be able to take over that land. Now remember, God would allow these people to convert. None of them did, except for one that we know of, right? What was her name? Rahab. And she converted, and she was able to become a Jew. So when you just wipe out, no, that's not it. Is God going to wipe out those that would come to salvation? No. That's not his nature. But you need to understand, we're saved today because God's people were protected. Had they gone in there and those people stayed in the land, then they would have been judged by God and fallen into idolatry, judged by God. Where would the Messiah be today? We're saved because God tried to make it thorough. Now you need to understand, they didn't completely cleanse the land. Now Joshua was successful because he was generally supposed to cleanse the land, and then the tribes were actually supposed to take care of their local areas, and they didn't do that. And so what ended up happening is they fell into idolatry at various different kinds, causing great hurt to their nation, right? And that's the history of Israel. You know, they went into 70 years of captivity by the Babylonians, and when they came back, they were nowhere near close where they started. But you know what's interesting? They never again fell into idolatry like that, ever again. But even one of their greatest kings worshipped at false God's altars, Solomon himself. That draw was so powerful. And so we kind of look at like, oh, he's just in there wiping out people. No, he's out there trying to save all of humanity through the Messiah that he will bring forth through this people. And these people could convert, but they would not. They knew that God was powerful. Remember? He's coming, and they get all freaked out and scared. And instead of trying to convert, they would either try to manipulate a deal where they could remain who they are but not really change. A lot of people try to do that with God. Or they would just flat out attack. We know you're powerful, but we're going to attack you. You know, they're not saying, how can we join with you? How can we become like you? How can we know your God? That's not what they were doing. And people will watch your life and they'll go, oh my gosh, how did that happen? How do you have joy right now? And then you tell them and they say, oh, I don't want that God. You know? And unbelief is a powerful thing. And so this is a land of unbelievers. And so he wins this decisive battle first, and now he starts capturing the cities of the kings, and he goes to the largest city first, this place, Hazor, that was the capital of this particular area. It was a place where highways met, so on and so forth. And so what the Lord had him do, though, he had him go to the biggest, most powerful city first. Let's get that one first, so then the other ones won't be as strong. You know, the Lord tends to deal with our most obvious sins first, doesn't he? When you get saved, normally you stop murdering people. Just kidding. You know, But God deals with you, right? I know my wife, when she came to know the Lord, she was doing a lot of drugs. God had to deal with that. And, she was with the boys, and God had to deal with that. And he dealt with it decisively and heavily in her life. He wanted those things to be away, But after those two things, my wife wasn't done. She's not sinless. Where is she? No, I'm just kidding. No, but she's not. She's still working on things today. But the most obvious, clear things. I don't think I've cussed since the day I got saved. And it's like, okay, well, let's deal with the obvious one in your life, Rod. I haven't been drunk since the day I got saved. I haven't even had a beer since the day I've been saved. But I guess I had beer bread the other day. I don't know if that counts, but it's just like, for me, God just said, no, get it out. Just get it out. I'll deal with the obvious ones first, the ones that are going to cause you to stumble. And that's what he did. And so they go to the biggest city first. And so we are to deal with our root problems first, and go at it. So often couples come in for counseling. And they start, if they've been married for, 15 years or something, they just start going at each other. And I just go, stop. We could spend the rest of my life trying to deal with all these little issues. Let's go back to the root problem. And then I start asking them, are you doing daily devotions? How's your walk with God? Well, what do you mean? No, I'm not talking about her, dude. I'm talking about you. What's your walk with God like? Well, no, not he. What's your walk with God like? Right? I mean, it's like, let's solve like 10,000 problems all at once and go to the root of the problem and see where your walk with God is at the moment. And we need to do that in our life. But the temptation is, since the bigger issues are harder to conquer, what we try to do is we try to take care of enough little issues so we look acceptable to the people around us, but we're still not functioning at full clip. Right? And so God wants to deal with the deep things. And we want to be a church where God deals with the deep things, right? And many women in our church go through a process called healed and set free. Many men, throughout the next year are going to be joining what we call conquer groups. And they're going to be dealing with not just with pornography, but other things in their life like rage and things like that. They're going to see the pattern that as they deal with the temptation towards pornography, they're going to actually see a pattern like, oh my gosh, this has to do with my rage, my anger, my hatred, my compromise in my life, my lying, everything. I mean, it's like, whoa, let's deal with these things. Instead of just kind of pushing them off and making ourselves look acceptable on the outside, but not running full clip on the inside. You guys ever seen a car that looked really nice? And then they turned it on and smoke was billowing out of the engine? That's what we do, right? Our engines are just seizing up and not running. But man, we wax that outside. We try to make it look good. We want to deal with the real stuff. Verse 12, so all the cities of those kings and all their kings Joshua took and struck with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed them, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. But as for the cities that stood on their mounds, Israel burned none of them except Hazor only, which Joshua had burned. Now the mounds were the ruins of cities from former days. When a city was destroyed, what they would do is they would burn the city. Walls in an ancient city normally don't burn, right? But what do the roofs do? The roofs burn, don't they? The roofs are normally made of lighter material, wood, and various things. And so the roofs burn. So the roofs burn, and then they push over the cities or the walls. And then they build on top of that nice little foundation that they created. You do this 25, 30 times to a city, and what you start to have is a mound. You ever hear of William Tell? The guy with the archer guy with the apple? That name Tell actually means mound. That's all it means. And what it is, it's an ancient city that's been knocked down so many times that it has created a mound. Excuse me. Oh, it's not coming. Okay, I was about to sneeze. But, so he wasn't supposed to burn all the cities that were Tells. Okay. Verse 14, and all the spoil of these cities and the livestock, the children of Israel took as booty for themselves, but they struck every man with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them, and they left none of them breathing, as the Lord had commanded Moses his servant. So Moses commanded Joshua, and so Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses. So remember, the key to Joshua's success was obedience to the words of God passed through Moses. Success comes through obedience to God. So often we want God to bless our disobedience. And he's gracious. He doesn't crush us when we disobey. Sometimes he definitely has to discipline us. But what he does is he is able to bless us when we are obedient. Because he's saying to, let's say, a young girl, oh, but I want to be married. I've always dreamed of my wedding when I was a little girl, but she knows, it says in 1 Corinthians, do not be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. For what does, darkness have to do with light? But she goes, but God wants me to be happy, doesn't he? No, listen, the road to happiness is found on the road to holiness, right? And so many times they jump out of that and they marry an unbeliever. And then what ends up happening is just a lot of strife and hurt for the rest of their life. When God says, no, through obedience, you might have to wait until you're 30, 32, 34, 35 years old. But I'm going to bring you the right person, and you will be radically blessed in that. In fact, not only will you be radically blessed in that, you will radically be blessed along the road. It's so funny because if you're single, you're thinking, oh, God bless me with marriage. No, God has blessed you with singleness right now. Right? And if you're married, you're thinking, oh, man, I could do so much more for the Lord if I wasn't married. No, God blessed you with marriage. And, oh, man, it's a crazy cycle. It is a crazy cycle. And the common denominator is we're never satisfied with what God has given us, right? Why? Because we have our eyes on the worldly things. We have our eyes on the things of the world and not the things of God. And God can so bless us as we surrender to whatever his desire is for us. And the greatest thing God can give us is when we're sitting right in the center of his obedience. Because there's a fountain of blessing coming out. And you can choose to be over here and going, how come you're not blessing me? But the center of obedience is right at the center of where that fount of blessing is coming out. And so he wants to bless you. And you got to try to get into the center of that fountain, which is the center of obedience. And so if my children fully rebel and they say, well, I want this, no, I ain't going to bless your disobedience. I can figure that one out. Certainly God's smarter than me. He doesn't bless our disobedience. He still loves us, but he's not going to reward our disobedience. If he does, we just disobey more. And so he was blessed through obedience. Remember Psalm 1, it's worth memorizing. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on it he meditates day and night. He shall be a tree planted by the waters, rivers of waters that bring forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. But the next words are, not so the unrighteous. Right? You plant yourself by the rivers of living water. Plant yourself in God's will. And God blessed Joshua with victory. Verse 16, thus Joshua took all this land, the mountain country, all the south, all the land of Goshen, the lowland, the Jordan plain, the mountains of Israel and its lowlands, from Mount Halak in the ascent to Seir, even as far as Baal Gad, in the valley of Lebanon, below Mount Hermon. He captured all their kings and struck them down and killed them. Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. Now, the land he's describing, if you go to Israel with us, and we're possibly going next spring, man, you'll be driving through there. And guys, in these areas, they just let the fruit fall off the trees. There's tons of fruit on the ground because if they sell all of it, it won't have any value at all because they just have such a huge abundance of fruit. And my wife, she just loves fruit. She's just looking out, like, stop the bus. I want to get out and I want to gorge myself on this fruit, And it just falls off the trees. because they have so much. You know what's hilarious? Jordan is like Islam light, and they pretty much get along with Israel. In fact, they would get along great with Israel if Syria wasn't trying to force them not to. So Syria is the bully in the neighborhood. Lebanon actually was a Christian country until Syria got involved, okay? And so they're the bullies that make everybody else work against Israel. But it's funny because Israel sends a ton of their fruit to Jordan, and they have a deal. And then Jordan boxes them and makes them look like Muslim produce, and they send them all over the Muslim world. So if you go into these places where you can't even exist as a Jew, like in Saudi Arabia, and you eat in a fancy hotel, you're probably eating Jewish fruit. Just saying. They're like the fourth or the fifth largest fruit producer in all the world. Their fruit is everywhere. And so that's all in that north area that he's talking about here. Now understand, in verse 6 it says, tomorrow I'm going to deliver them up. What happened is the main battles were taken care of, but you need to clean up the rest, right? My wife hates it when our house gets dirty. But here's the thing, I'm a guy, right? So I walk in the house, our house is so dirty. And I walk in, I go, I picked up my socks. The house isn't dirty. I'm sorry I left my shoes on the floor, but I'll pick those up. Is our house still dirty? And my wife's like, I can feel it, crawling all over me. And what the deal is, the house is clean in general, and you would come into our house and not be offended. But my wife, and maybe it came through raising kids, I don't know, but just the dirt that starts to form along the baseboards and, the things that haven't been vacuumed and all those little things in the top of the refrigerator and the top of the fans and on and on and on, all the stuff that's falling behind the dryer over here, it's like all these things, it's like these things are screaming out at her. But it can look generally clean. And so Joshua's job was to do the general work, but there was still more work to do. And in our lives, again, you don't stop just because you got the general sins out of your life. You need to start to work on the other things. And don't let them just sit out there. Because some victories take a lot of patience, right? A lot more small battles. And I've really been meditating on this a lot. Like, why does God, okay, so in my life, took away alcohol and drugs out of my life. I mean, I've broken myself up pretty bad. I've had to take drugs, but not to go out and party and get high, but to kill pain. But that desire just to get loaded, God took it away from me right away. Some people he does, some people he doesn't. With me, he did. And I really didn't cuss too much before, so I don't know that really was an issue. I don't know, haven't cussed very much. But let's just say, the alcohol and drugs. Took it completely out of my life right away. But here's the thing. Some people he doesn't. Some people struggle with it. The person who continues to struggle with it needs to keep on struggling with it until they're victorious over it. And the reason God wouldn't take that out of their life right away is not because he does not love them. It's because for them, they're learning all types of things along the path that they wouldn't appreciate or wouldn't learn along the way. My wife, because she got saved and she struggled for a couple years to continue to go out and party, my wife has incredible compassion on those that struggle with those types of things. I don't. I just stopped. Right? But for different purposes, my wife did struggle. And about a couple months after she stopped is when I actually met her, which was nice. So I wasn't in her life when that was happening. But there's other things in my life that have continued to plague me that I keep on having to fight against. And I'm not going to give up fighting. I'm not just going to say, okay, well, it's there, whatever. Because the thing is, in the struggle are the lessons. There's a lesson in those struggles. There's a lesson along the way. And one of the biggest lessons you learn as you continue to struggle against certain sins, and whether it be rage, anger, unforgiveness, whatever it is in your life that you have to keep on struggling against, is one of the biggest things it shows you is God is not going to give up on you. Right? His love for you is persistent, and he always desires the best for you. At the same time, his grace is always persistent towards you as well. Because every time you stumble into that, you turn around and there he is, waiting for you to turn around. And so the thing is, we can't be a pompous church, because some of us, like if I was leading an alcohol ministry, it'd be like, well, just stop. Okay, well, let's talk about lust of the flesh. Oh, well, that's a little harder, because I got to have blocks on my computers and be accountable and stuff like that. I have an accountability partner I meet with every Friday. Love that. Love being free from that, but I'm not getting rid of my accountability partner. And so when we start this thing with pornography, I'm like, yeah, man, let's find freedom, because it's a really good thing, man, because I understand. So God has purposes in everything. And so he doesn't just, that'd be nice, right? We're perfect, now we can judge everybody else. And that's what would happen with us, right? If God just ripped every sin out of us all at once, just supernaturally, we wouldn't appreciate the struggle. We wouldn't learn things along the way. And we get so high and mighty on ourselves, we'd all write books about how great we are because God healed us. How great are you because God healed you? You're just the object of healing. You're not great. He healed you. Right? It's so funny in some churches. Oh, the pastor's so gifted, we need to worship him and buy him a Harley. A gift is a gift. He didn't give it to himself. The one you worship, if someone has a gift, is the gift giver, not the person. See what I'm saying? That the church would have the proper attitude. We wouldn't have a bunch of people out there with signs, God hates faggots. Because for all of sin and fall short of the glory of God, God hates sin. And so they'd be a little bit more humble about it, wouldn't they? And they'd be going out there, God desires for you to have fellowship with him and walk with him. Oh, but I'm homosexual. You say, hey, stop. You need to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and he will deal with that. But let's bring you to Christ first. That's a much different way to approach, and it's a humble way, saying, God saves sinners, and I was one of those sinners. Not the same sin that you're a sinner, but different. I got my own. Oh, what would the reputation of the church be? Would it be a bunch of hypocrites, holier than thou jerks looking down on everybody else? Oh, let it not be so. I remember a man that we had as an usher one time. He used to make all the young men take off their hats as they were coming in the sanctuary. Get that hat off your head. And then he would tell people that God is against tattoos. And I had to pull him aside and go, you know what, I love you and everything, but you got to stop doing that. I go, I learned that hats aren't good, and you know what? That unbelieving guy with a hat on might figure out that on Sunday mornings it might not be good to wear a baseball hat because no one else is. But even if he doesn't, well, that's okay. Because a baseball hat is never mentioned in the Bible. Right? And so you go through these things. But to have a humble heart, to be able to say, and so what I'm saying is, some of you guys have had things that have remained in your life, and you've given up struggling. Keep on struggling. Because the lesson's along the road. And unfortunately, none of us are going to die perfect. When the rapture comes, none of us are going to be perfect until we're on our way up, right? So some victories take patience, but, the lessons along the way. This man wrote a book called Swim with the Sharks, and he interviewed an 88-year-old president of Japan's largest enterprise, an electric company. And in answering the interviewer's questions on the future of his company, this 88-year-old man was involved in the conversation. It goes like this: Mr. President of the company, how does your company have long-range goals? Or does your company have long-range goals? Well, his answer is yes. The next question, how long are your long-range goals? The answer was 250 years. Next question, what do you need to carry them out? Answer, patience. Interview over. And so, in all reality, we need to take the steps in the right direction. And that next step might be the final healing, or it might not. You know, very often in marriage, the first few years are rocky. But who's to know that week after the divorce might have been the breakthrough? You just don't know. I tell you what, I'm a man. You know, I get in a fight with my wife. Oh, it's all over. And then we make up. Oh, it's all good. Very simple. You know, if we're not getting along bad, we're getting along good, you know. And, but man, I've 26 years next month. And I don't think I've been more in love with my wife than ever, you know. And we're hilarious to hang out with, because she'll be like, he didn't say that. Oh, yeah, he did. Oh, you didn't do. Oh, yeah, she did. And we laugh. We have so much fun. But I tell you what, there was times when we just felt like we're not going to make it, but we got to stay together because we just have to, because God didn't give us a way out. You know, and we wouldn't be enjoying what we have today unless we had endured that next step. You know, so don't jump out of obedience. Hebrews 6:12. That you do not become sluggish, but imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. The answer might be just around the corner. Verse 19, there was not a city that made peace with the children of Israel except the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. Remember, they'd made that deal with them. All the others they took in battle, for it was of the Lord to harden their hearts, that they should come against Israel in battle, that he may utterly destroy them, that they may receive no mercy, but that he might destroy them as the Lord had commanded Moses. Now, isn't that weird? So the Lord hardens their heart so that they'll come against Israel. Here's what God is doing. God knows that these people need to be out of the land. He knows that they are rebellious against God and that they're never going to turn. But he also knows that if they don't battle the Israelites flat on, these people might remain in the land and be a plague against the nation of Israel for a long period of time. So when it says hardened, it also means strengthened. He strengthened their hearts in the direction that they were already going so his plans would be fulfilled. And so in the same sense, I could say, Lord, harden my heart in the right direction. If my heart is going to God, I want him to give me more resolve, right? And if God gives you more resolve through a prayer, what he's doing is he's hardening your heart in the right direction. And so it's not God just damning people out of the blue just for the fun of it. It's God fulfilling his ultimate plan. If not, they would have just scattered and they wouldn't have been able to battle all of them, and they would have remained a plague against Israel as long as they continued to survive. And that's a principle in the scriptures you need to understand, because certainly during the Exodus that happened with Pharaoh. But God had 10 plagues. Pharaoh might have quit after 7. Bummer. Didn't finish my plan. And so he hardened Pharaoh's heart so Pharaoh would keep on going. Okay? And so they take the promised land. He gives Israelites the place as a homeland, and he also judges those people who had been rebellious against him for 400 years. Verse 21, at that time Joshua came and he cut off Anakim from the mountains, from Hebron to Debir to Anab, and all the mountains of Judah, from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them in their cities. Now it's interesting because these people, these sons of Anakim, were actually giants. They, 40 years before, were afraid to go into the land because of the giants. And now it just says once they went into the land, now they're powerful and strong, they just take care of the giants. How many verses? There's the answer. 2. 2 verses. Just 2. And they just wipe them out. For 40 years they suffered in the desert because they were afraid of these giants. 2 verses, they wipe them out once they're in obedience. Think about that. Wow, obedience is a pretty powerful thing, isn't it? Now again, as they were in the wilderness, there was faithlessness still amongst the camp, right? A lot of those people who had been slaves or had the attitude of slavery before, who were holding on to Egypt, were afraid to go into the land. The reason they were out there for 40 years is these people needed to die off, and a new generation that had faith in God needed to be raised up. Okay, because they were faithless. The enemy was the same. And then what God did was He made them strong enough to face their enemy. Israel had changed a lot. Again, that process is so important as you move forward. That process as you work to save your marriage. That process as you continue to pray for that prodigal child. That process as you push forward to pull yourself out of a bankruptcy or whatever it is. There's a process to it. But you know what? In the end, it makes you strong, doesn't it? It makes you a better person. When my son died, there was a process to that healing that made me a better person. It wasn't a fun one, but it certainly was a trial. Hannah, did you come out of prison a different person than when you went in? You were a pretty good person when you left, but you came out a lot stronger. Don't mess with Hannah. No, just kidding. But spiritually, just a different person, and we got to watch it with all the trials. The letters were tearful, hurtful, deep, but they were strengthening the whole time. And so we're I just wanted easy street. No, you don't. Because what happens to someone that just sits in a recliner all day long? Eventually, they're not going to be able to get out of the bed or out of the recliner. What happens to their quality of life? What happens to the Christian that never wants to go to a church work day? What happens to the Christian that never wants to grow anymore? Eventually, they're not going to be able to do anything in the Lord. And so we need to be willing to face trials in order to grow. Remember when David faced Goliath? He was trying to talk the army of the Israelites to allow him to go in. And you know what he said to King Saul? He said, I've faced bears. I've faced lions. I can face some stinking, giant. What's the deal? But God had prepared him, right? Had he never been the one that was out in the wilderness looking over the sheep. Now understand, if you were a bad kid in your family, you looked after the sheep. In David's family, he was the offscouring. Oh, that's so bad. Poor David. Well, what did God do with poor David? He made him a hero 10,000 times over. Right? And ultimately the best king that Israel ever had. So that many people are named David even today in America. Think about how weird that is. Right? And he was the offscouring of his family. What a trial, poor kid. But man, go look after the stinky sheep. Go get eaten by a lion. Go get ripped apart by a bear. We don't care. And what did God do? Endure through those trials. And so these giants are there. Again, we see them again with David. And so, but they just wipe out most of them. It says, none of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel. So they actually, some were outside of that. And it says some remained in Gaza and Gath, and that's where Goliath was from, and Ashdod. So Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord had said to Moses, and Joshua gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to their divisions by their tribes. Then the land rested from war. Brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, not lacking in any good thing. Persevere. Persevere and push. And you'll be able to look back and go, oh my gosh, God, you've done so many awesome things through this. If you just whine and complain, you get to the end of a trial. Are all those lessons going to be glaring you in the face? Again, the thing that just kills me about my father is after he'd broken his neck, I was afraid he was going to reject God because he's a very strong man. And so I visited him, and he was completely unconscious for the first 3 weeks that I was there. I actually had to come back. We were planning the church. And then finally we took our vacation that summer, and I was going to see my dad. I knew he was awake. And so my dad was asleep when I went by his bedside, and it was only he and I in the room. And he looks up, he sees it's me, and me and my dad, he had 6 kids, but he and I talked theology. We were the two that got into that stuff. He was an elder, a Bible teacher, a Bible scholar, really. And he just looks at me and he goes, I know what God's doing, Rod, but he's doing something. And he had completely embraced and accepted the fact that God was still alive and moving in his life. And I tell you that today, 16 years later, I'm still telling stories about my dad to encourage people. People have a talk, I'm having such a hard time getting to church. You know what I tell them? They go, my dad used to go to church. You know how long it took him to get ready to go to church? They used to have to pick him up with a crane and put him in this funky, crazy wheelchair with all these beeping lights, and he had to bring all his oxygen with him, and it was clanging and ganging, and they had to have a special lift to get into the van and a special van to drive him around and get him out of the van. It took him 3 to 4 hours just to get to church, and my dad would go every week. And he would go and be there, and he was so sick that sometimes he'd just fall asleep, and he'd fall asleep. And again, my dad was a guy that taught in that church. But he would be in the back, and there's like 2,000 people at that church, and he'd be in the back. His thing would be beeping or whatever. He didn't care because he was going to be where the saints were, where God was going to be worshiped. And we say, well, I'm tired today. Hit your alarm twice. It's like, there's lessons in that, right? Man, Bethany Hamilton would have been a multiple-time world champion surfer. She got her arm bitten off at 14 or 15 years old. You know what she says about that? Christian girl, went to Calvary Chapel. Just saying. She said, no, it's fine that my arm got bitten off. I'll never be the world champion. She goes, but I've sure ministered to a lot more people than I ever could have as world champion. Think about that. Now she's married, has a baby, and she's still sharing her story with people, and she's still an inspiration, and she can still surf better than you or me, And God's good. God's good. Dear God, we do thank you that you are a God of perspective, and your perspective is eternity, and that, Lord, you haven't lost control like grabbing a slippery piece of soap. You are not out of control. You're not flailing your arms. Lord, we just surrender things to you because you do know what's going on and we don't. So help us to be faithful to read what your word says. Lord, we know you don't give us the whole story as far as what is facing us the next day, but we know that you know it. And as the saying goes, Lord, we don't know what the future holds, but we know you who hold the future. May it be that we live like that on a day-to-day basis. I would just pray for any of those in here that have given up the battle, that they pick up the battle, that tomorrow may be the victory, or tomorrow may be a huge lesson that they'd miss out on if they didn't pick up the battle. So Lord, help us to battle against those sins in our lives and battle for victory, that even as we go along that path, we may become strong warriors for you. And even when we win that victory, now we're just ready for another one, God. Oh, wake up the church, wake up Calvary Chapel, the Coastlands, God, that we may be a church that really seeks to love you and obey you and serve you and to trust you, God. And we lift up these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's go ahead and stand up and close with the song.